Since early May, I believe we've had over 12 inches of rain in this area, which I don't know if that's broken historical records, but it's been just an extremely wet month of May and into early June. We had an inch of rain the other day, and last night we had quite a bit of rain. Point of the story is lots and lots of water moving through the landscape, as you can see behind me. I wanted to talk in this video in a leisurely, meandering way what my observations are on how water is moving through our particular little half-acre and our neighbor's space after years and years of earthworks, hand-powered and some machine-powered earthworks. How's the water being released? Is it moving soil? All those sorts of questions. How are we keeping the gardens really productive when there's this much rain? It's lovely. It's a little excessive. How's it working? Well, you can certainly see how it is excessive in the backyard. It's a little tough to make this work back here as far as infiltrating water really well. When you've got two of these guys run around back here non-stop, churning up the soil. And I think over time it's very, very rich back here. We add lots and lots of organic matter. There's lots of leaves. There's sawdust that we add when things dry out. But the boys having a play space and having this impermeable space right here, which is the pad of an old little garage. This will eventually be a barbecue pit area and a potting area. But this area is holding water in a way that's not awesome. But this isn't where we garden. The backyard is. And over the years, we've worked on systems, not explicitly swales and ditches, but the idea of creating a three-dimensionality to the landscape. So I want to explore that in greater detail and look at flooded walkways, but garden beds that are doing pretty well. And we can start with a pretty extreme example here, which is our cattle panel high tunnel, which was made a bunch of years ago. I think this is a 10-year-old structure now. Very, very simple to build. I'll link to it here if you're interested. And you can see this is a very excessive moment of water, but it's actually really functional. It's unappealing to the eye in a way. I mean, I'm wearing boots, or you come out bare feet this time of year, and that's that. You definitely don't want to be wearing sneakers or dress shoes in this landscape this time of year. The water in here is by design. So this walkway was dug out intentionally, and it is on contour. So when we have extreme amounts of rain, this can flood and slowly but surely wick all of that excess water into the beds, which are much higher. It doesn't matter really how much intense rain we have. These beds almost certainly would never flood, but they have access to an immense amount of free choice water for a little bit. So the hot peppers in here, the gingers, all sorts of different plants that are growing in this space will be able to wick up the water. When we have a few days of non-rain, this will slowly get absorbed and then descend back down. In the winter months, we can fill this with compost so that it gets activated and radiates heat. And in the summer, it can be loaded with some finished compost, which is kind of gross and murky, but this basically makes this walkway an entire compost tea system that the beds can wick up all that excess nutrient, and then we can dig this out later on, put it on the beds as a mulch, and hold even more water. Pretty extreme example with that space, but that pattern is what we play with in the garden quite a bit. The idea of acknowledging that fundamentally this is a pretty wet landscape on average year after year, and our landscape in particular on a north slope, 1,200 foot elevation with a lot of clay. It's very sluggish to release water anyway. Over the years, we have done a management practice in here that feels pretty functional. The garden beds themselves are extremely hydrated, that's to be sure, but they're not inundated, they're not anaerobic or anoxic with water loading in the pore space. You can see all the lettuces in here are extremely happy. They have access to both water and air by being in these raised beds. The center of the beds are set to plums for our nursery work. So again, here's lettuce on the edge, and this one has Siberian peaches. Peach trees do not want to be in standing water, and these little babies feel very, very happy to me. And the pattern is acknowledging that when there's excess water, we want it to go somewhere. So the pathway is a great place for the water to stand for a bit, for a day, even a week if it needs to. So over the years, we've filled the pathways with material like sawdust, wood chips, leaves, etc. I've documented that in the past, and I'll link to that here. We let it be our walkway for the summer, so we haven't re-upped the walkways yet. We've been digging this out. So after a year of the walkways having carbon, we can then dig it out, and put it on the beds, mix it into the soil there. So every year we're building the beds up and we're bringing the walkways down. And some of that pattern is more or less on contour. So here's a bed that runs east-west, which is about contour for this landscape. And you can see sweet peas just to the south are climbing. They're super happy, even with 12 inches of rain over the last few weeks. By all accounts, if this was at grade, if all of this was level, most of this garden would have been flooded by now. But even just 2 inches, 4 inches of raised soil here for the production of the food crops and the nursery crops that we want makes all the difference in the world for the feeder roots of the plants to not drown when there's excessive rain. And the walkway, super moist for a little while, and then it'll dry up as the moisture's wicked in or it evaporates. Either way is fine, it works for us. You can see a kind of a raw expression here, but there's a work in progress of a major ditch that runs through the garden. This one goes down quite a bit. We needed to renovate. I dug out the old pipe that was through here. We'll put this back in and get this covered with chips later on. But this stays wet for a bunch of days beyond the walkways. This is basically a drainage channel for excess water. We can always block it up if we're entering a drought and we want to hold on to excess water if there's a flood. We can do that, but for the most part this allows the water to meander northbound, so it's not exactly on contour. It's going out and ends up on the north end of this garden, where it can finally go a little bit to the east, which brings it down slope a little further. But with this berm next to it, there are all these plants that really like a lot of nutrient and water to soak up the excess. So there's red currants underneath a grafted apple tree up on the berm. There is an elderberry here. This is a variety called Wildwood that's doing pretty well. And then Scotia, which is quite clearly happy with itself. So all the excess water runs through this channel, this walkway, past all these hungry, beautiful, productive plants, and ultimately ends up in this little pondette. So this is an intentional depression in the landscape, dug down about 2 or 3 feet. It's populated with calamus, which is a nice native medicinal perennial plant. It's flanked with honeyberry and gooseberry, as well as a native high bush cranberry, which are all water-loving plants. There's an alder here growing that can provide nitrogen, and we can cut for mulch. And that excess water in the landscape is funneled to here. Rather than buried in a pipe and shunted down to the road, it settles in a pond like this. This is small, but every few years we can dig some calamus and dig out the muck, the silt, the nutrient, put it back on the garden beds and re-up the holding capacity of this. Or we can just let it settle and mellow into an ecosystem service that will eventually silt in but still be functional enough. In the meantime, we can nibble on some honeyberries and gooseberries, some elderberries, some apples, some high bush cranberries, and harvest medicine if we want. It's important to note all of this work has been slow and iterative. It has not been a master plan, sit down and figure out exact hydrology picture, and this needs to be this dimension and this exact perfect on contour measured with a laser level. It's just been coming out after each intense rain for 5-10 years or so, and dig a little bit more in one area, get this channel going a little bit better, block it up over here, dig deeper over here, build up over there. So what you're seeing is a reaction to weather over a decade, slowly getting better and better. It doesn't have to be like dialed in. This is an ecosystem that takes some time, and it's going to go way beyond this in quality over time too, in a way that I don't know yet because we haven't gotten that information yet. But you can see another little, this one's very, very active right now. This is a drainage channel from further upslope that's doing the same thing of moving down, allowing it to freely move as needed, but being interrupted with wapato or duck potato, a whole thicket of stinging nettles and all sorts of vegetation in the channel, and then that little pond again. So we're very comfortable with keeping the channels relatively open in some spots and then really letting them thicken up with vegetation in others, and that captures nutrient and actual physical material. It filters as it goes. So the more life the better in these water shedding and holding solutions. I'm wandering out now to our neighbor's landscape. There's a lot more to look at. At some point I'll do an update on our machine dug pond, but I want to keep this in the human scale for folks that are interested in seeing that. And this is to the east of our neighbor Ian and Jillian's driveway. This is a garden space that we started working on a few years ago. I'll link to it here. We had air prune boxes in this area a bunch of years ago. They've migrated to another spot, and all of that rich soil, all that deposit was left here, and now it's a very, very complex mix of beautiful medicinal and annual, or perennial and annual medicinal and edible herbs, as well as nursery plants. That's the theme, is always like, okay, if there's a couple of lettuces, let's also put in some gumi and sea kale. And all of this is adjacent to the driveway, where you can see it's very subtle, but there's a trench that's dug here that allows the water to leave. It needs to continue heading north down to the road, but it gets to settle up against a really deep deposition of wood chips. So we don't want it pumping directly into the garden, just in case there's some excess gunk in there. But up against a windrow of wood chips, it can wick and soak and filter. There's lots and lots of mushroom life in here, and we trust that as it wicks it up into the garden, will purify things, and the plants seem extremely happy for it. So this is an area that has deep deposition of organic matter and very clearly is mulched immensely, and that helps preserve and conserve the excess water. When it's excessive at certain moments, it can slowly settle in and then be protected from evaporation later and slowly feed the plants. So we've got nursery beds of gumi, there's pawpaws and persimmon seedlings, there's divisions of runners of seaberry, so very high value nursery work. And then another water feature in this landscape, you can see this channel running through here. This is basically one of the major flow channels for excess water in the landscape. This goes all the way back up to a spring up in the hillside, and we've got this wood chip pile that kind of fell into the water a little. Oh well, we'll dig that out over time. But what's happening here is there's a channel we can change. We can put mud here and have it go into a channel in the back. But recently this was dug open with a shovel, and some of it got flooded out. Whoops. It was a young installation of watercress, and I think the intensity of the rain has been such. I'll have to come back through here and help these out and put rocks on them. But we've added watercress every 2 feet or 3 feet. You can see where they haven't been blown out. So in making this video, it's letting me know that some of the work I need to do is to revisit this with bricks and stones to go over the root systems of these as they get tethered into the landscape. But so the water's running through, the watercress can capture a huge amount of nutrient and water and turn it into food for us. I trust what's happening here because upslope of this, it's not that gnarly at all. It's basically woods. And then right next to it is a huge thicket of coppiced willow. There's cup plant, which is another nutrient-hungry perennial. There's river locust, which has been pollarded and will resprout. And there's all sorts of really hungry and thirsty miscanthus grasses on the far end. So we've got a perennial food crop in the middle, an aquatic food crop, and then adjacent to that, all sorts of biomass and filtering plants right there. So we sacrifice this walkway, the eastern walkway of this nursery space, becomes a waterway after every rain, and then we can harvest food from it. It dries out, but the beds can wick it in over time. So we just have to lean into the fact that this is going to be periodically a very reactive and wet landscape, especially after 12 inches of rain in a month. But come July, we can walk through here and hopefully the watercress still has enough moisture to do its work. I know there's always more to this that I could be exploring with folks, and I'd love to do that. Let me know what sort of other layers of detail you'd want to see talked about in these systems. But the idea is basically over time, observing how water moves through a landscape and interacting with it in slow and iterative ways and adding additional layers of complexity begets a really nice resilient system that feels pretty abundant and pretty healthy and offers a lot of layers of both food and medicine and even income as far as the nursery stock is concerned. And that's after a punishingly intense amount of rain where normal tillage, flatland, annual regimes are having an extremely hard time getting the growing season up and running. A system like this can react and absorb and actually cache the water, and then we can get dry, hot weather coming up, and all this stuff can just grow so much faster. I guess more than anything, it's just words of encouragement. If you find yourself feeling a little defeated by just how much rain is coming in, a lot of you are dealing with drought. Everybody's got different challenges at different times, but modifying how water moves through your landscape by removing impediments to the water in certain spots, building up adjacent to that, seeing how things react and making adjustments as you go. It's very deeply fruitful. It also is on a very slow time scale, so patience and labor get woven together in a way that's actually pretty lovely, and then you get to learn a lot as you go. Like I'm learning that this little channel of watercress, which is new and lovely, needs a lot more TLC. So that's my work for the day today. I've got all these little bricks that are left over from when we had air prune boxes here. Nice, natural, simple bricks. And I think I'll go through and pin each of these watercresses with bricks across that water channel so silt can back up and do its thing. And these can avoid getting washed away, because I'd like to eat some watercress one of these days. Thanks for watching.